Good evening. Good evening. We're going to ask everyone if you could go ahead and find your seats. We are waiting on one more of our participating partners to get here. She is about 5 minutes out, so whenever she comes through the door, we want to go ahead and get started. So we're asking everyone if they could find their seats and take them. Good evening again, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is D'Angelo Houston. I am the president of the Meridian Lauderdale branch of the NAACP. It is my pleasure to welcome each of you to our community meeting. The NAACP has partnered with several different vendors as you see them around the room. We have One Voice in the corner. We have Mississippi Votes. We also have Black with No Chaser, and several other organizations that have united in the process of doing what you guys asked us to do. The community has cried out that we need to know more information about what's going on in our legislative process. We need to know what it is that our legislators are voting on and how they're voting on. We need to know what protections we have under the current laws and what changes we can expect under the new laws. So that's how this event was birthed. This is a series of events that's taking place across the state, in part with Amir Badet leading the show. So for those of you who don't know who Amir is a proud Meridianite. He graduated Meridian High School class of 2006. And he's also an attorney who represents Meridian well. So as we go through this process tonight, you will see Amir come with us. He's going to be giving us trainings on how we should give testimony. So the purpose of tonight is for you guys to tell us and our legislators that were so kind enough to take time out of their schedules to come join in with us on, let's give them a hand for that. This is our time to express ourselves and testify about how we feel that access to the ballot should be. Tell them some of the issues that we've run into while trying to vote or trying to register to vote, and things that we see that hinder the vote in our neighborhoods. So if you feel that you have a story that you would like to tell, if you feel like you know a story that should be told, tonight is the time to do so, because all of this will be recorded on a legal record so that we will have access to all of the citizens' testimonies on what it is that we need to do as a community to make sure that we keep all of the protections under the law. So at this time, I'm gonna invite Amir to the mic, and you guys give him a hand as he comes.
Thank you so much, D'Angelo. Thank you so much to everyone who is here tonight. As D'Angelo mentioned, my name is Amir Badat. I am a voting rights attorney. I live in Jackson, but I grew up here in Meridian, and it feels so good to be here at home with the community here in Meridian, the community that I grew up in. I am a proud graduate of Meridian High School, class of 2006. There we go Wildcats. And so I feel really, really grateful to have the opportunity to do the type of work that I do in the community that raised me. And I feel really grateful to be here with all of you tonight to talk about what is, in my mind, one of the most important issues that we are facing as Meridianites, as Mississippians, and as Americans right now. And so what we're here to do tonight is for the community to provide input into what types of protections we want to see for our voting rights in this country, and what the vision for our democracy should be in this country. We have experienced an assault on our voting rights over the last 15 years. The Supreme Court, in multiple decisions over the last 15 years, has chipped away and gutted the Voting Rights Act, which is one of the most transformational pieces of law that Congress has ever passed. The Voting Rights Act is what pulled this country out of Jim Crow. It's what pulled Mississippi out of Jim Crow. It is what allowed Black people in Mississippi to actually have representation at every level of government, from Congress to the state legislature, all the way down to the city council and the school board and the board of aldermen. The reason that we have the representation that we do in our elected bodies right now is because of the Voting Rights Act, and that is exactly what is under attack right now. And so what we're here to do today is to fight back against that. And we're here to fight back in a number of different ways. And one way is to provide testimony about the community's lived experiences with voting, difficulties with voting, difficulties with achieving fair representation, discriminatory redistricting, and what the community believes should be the protections that we have on our voting rights. And the reason why this is so important is because, as D'Angelo mentioned, we have a court reporter who's over here taking down people's testimony, she's transcribing it, it's being recorded by video. We are creating a public record. We're creating a public record that we will show to the legislature here in Mississippi. We're creating a public record that we will show to Congress. And that public record is going to show why we need protections for voting rights, why the state legislature needs to act on legislation like the Mississippi Voting Rights Act, why Congress needs to act on legislation to replace the Federal Voting Rights Act, to replace and to fill the gaps that have been left by the Supreme Court's decisions that it's made in the last 15 years. And so this is not just a practice of people getting up here and talking about their experiences. That's important, but in the 1800s, there were Black conventions convened across the entire country. And during the Civil War, Black conventions convened here in Mississippi by Black community members who came together to talk about what types of protections they wanted to see in a new democracy, to talk about what a new democracy should look like. And those conversations, the outcome of those conventions, fed directly into crafting the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that are the cornerstone of American democracy today. In the 1960s, we had Freedom Summer, right, in 1964, Freedom Summer here in Mississippi. Freedom Summer, what most of us know about Freedom Summer is, the voter registration, the freedom schools, and the efforts to get people engaged in the political process. But what people don't know as much is that Freedom Summer also involved documentation of all of the barriers that people faced when they tried to go register to vote, of the violence, the terrorism that people had to overcome just to go register to vote. And that documentation, the testimony of people who went to the circuit clerk's office to try to register to vote, was the basis for the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. That testimony was the reason why there was a ban on poll taxes and literacy tests in the Voting Rights Act. That testimony, those experiences of Black Mississippians was the reason why we had a ban on voter intimidation in the Voting Rights Act. And so what we're doing here today is part of a long history of Mississippians being part of crafting their own solutions, crafting the answers to what should our democracy look like. And so I wanted to start by talking about that, to highlight kind of why we're here, why it's so important for us to be here. Everyone should have a document that looks like this. Does everyone have this document? Okay, I see someone back there doesn't have one of these. Do we have any extra copies? Yeah, okay. We will bring you one of these documents, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I got you. And so, okay, we got a couple of people back here that don't have documents. So what this is a community testimony guide. So you might be asking, what am I supposed to talk about? What do you want testimony about? What would be most helpful to create that public record? All of your answers are right here. We got a good 2-pager, 1.5-pager over here that will help you figure out what your testimony should include. And so what we're gonna do for the next few minutes is just go over some of the information here on this guide. And what you can do is just, as we're talking through it, you can just put answers right next to some of these questions to help you determine what you want to talk about, what good testimony would be. And so first off, well, let me back up for a second and just explain the format. So what we'll do is we'll have, I'll call people up. Some people have already signed up to testify, but even if you haven't signed up, that's totally fine. You can decide to testify today, and I'll call you up. You'll sit right here. I'll be sitting next to you. You'll have 3 minutes, around 3 minutes. I know some of y'all like to talk. So around 3 minutes. And we will hear from you about your experiences with voting, the stuff that we're going to go through in this document right here. And then you'll step down and we'll call up the next person. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. We'll also have, we're lucky to be joined by a voting rights expert from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Imani Brooks, who's over here with us. She is an expert in voting rights and state voting rights acts, and so she's also going to provide some testimony to help us understand what goes into a state voting rights act and the types of protections that are involved there. And then we'll have our members of the legislature here to provide their reactions to the testimony that they're hearing from the community members today. And by the way, we are very grateful for our members of the legislature to be here. It's so incredibly important for legislators to hear from community members. And we, I want to express gratitude to y'all for being here to hear from community members here today. In the, people who y'all represent, your constituents, is so important, and we appreciate y'all being here. Okay, so why don't we go through this document, and then we'll get started with the testimony. So the first thing that you'll talk about when you get up here is introduce yourself. What is your name? Where do you live? Tell us a little bit about your community. This is the neighborhood that I live in. This is what my community looks like. And this is why I'm here today to testify. And then the next thing is, why are you here today? What motivated you to attend this hearing? Why is voting and fair representation important to you and your community? Then you can talk about your experience with voting. And this is going to be kind of the meat of your testimony. Have you or someone that you know experienced any barriers to voting? And when I say barriers, people oftentimes think, oh, did someone prevent me altogether from voting? Or did someone say, no, you can't cast a ballot? It doesn't have to be kind of that dramatic. It can be as simple as a barrier that you had to experience, a difficulty that you had to overcome to cast your ballot. Did your polling location change? Was it difficult for you to find your polling location? When you got to the polling place, did you know where to go? Did a poll worker tell you that you weren't on the poll book and you had to cast an affidavit ballot? These are all the types of things that are relevant to what we're talking about here today, because what we're talking about are not just things that completely stop you from voting. We're talking about anything that makes it more difficult to vote, because when those difficulties accumulate, that's what voter suppression is. That's what voter suppression in today's America is when small difficulties accumulate to make it more and more difficult for people to vote and less likely for people to vote. And so things like polling place changes, long lines, difficulties getting to the polls, confusion about how to vote, difficulties with absentee voting, all of those things are relevant to these barriers. Then talk a little bit about your community. What makes your community unique? What are some of the shared interests that your community has? Do you feel that your community has a meaningful voice in government at any level, at the city council level, at the state legislative level, at the congressional level? Do you feel like your community is adequately represented by your representatives? And if they are, tell us why. Why do you feel like they are? And if they're not, then tell us why. Why does all of this matter? That's the next thing. How do voting rights affect your family, your neighbors, future generations, your kids? What happens when communities are not fairly represented? And what would a stronger democracy in Mississippi look like? And then looking forward, what changes would you like to see in how elections are administered? And what the rules are for how to cast your ballot? What types of protections do you want to see? In Mississippi, we don't have early voting. You have to vote on election day or have an excuse to vote absentee. We're only one of 3 states in the entire country that doesn't have early voting. Is early voting something that would make it easier for you to be able to cast your ballot? What do you hope that new legislation would accomplish? And then what is your message to lawmakers? So one thing that you should remember for tonight when you're providing testimony, your audience is the lawmakers, the people in the state legislature, the people in Congress who are making laws. Luckily, we have a few of our legislators joining us tonight, but we don't have all of them. And so we want to talk to everyone. We want to talk to all of the lawmakers who are making decisions about our democracy to tell them exactly what we want them to do. And so let me pause there and see if anyone has any questions about what I just talked about. I know I went through a lot of information. So does anyone have any questions about providing testimony tonight? Okay, no questions? Yes, question. Yeah, your community can be defined really in whatever way that you consider your community to look like. It could be your neighborhood, it could be your city, it could be the city of Meridian, it could be the county, Lauderdale County, it could be the region. And so that's really up to you to define what your community is. And the way that I would think about it is, who are the people who have the same interests as you? And when I say interests, I mean, who are the people who care about the same policy outcomes that you care about? Who are the people that are going through the same problems that your community is? That's who your community would be. Thank you for that question. Any other questions before we get started? Okay. All right. So if no one has any questions, we're going to go ahead and start calling people up. First on my list, I have, give me 1 second. Okay, I'd like to invite Ramona Sanders to provide testimony. I didn't tell her I was going to call her first, but but you're ready. You're ready. Come on. Let's yeah, everyone give her a round of applause. There we go.
Okay. Didn't expect this first, but okay. All right, so you gonna read off or you want me to read off? Okay, my name is Ramona Sanders. I do live here in Meridian, actually right here in Ward 2. Tell you about my, okay, sorry about that, ma'am. My name's Ramona Sanders. I live here in Meridian in Ward 2. I am a mother, a aunt, great aunt, great aunt. I'm the last out of 7 kids. What motivated me to attend this hearing today? Meridian. The things I've seen that's gone down in the last 20 years, as far as, let alone with the voting rights with Louisiana and Calais, but also with not having the representation here for us here in Meridian. Not having the people to speak for us. We have a lot of people that come into this community. I'm just gonna be honest with you, they take. Nobody's putting in. Nobody's putting any energy. They're not putting in any money. We're constantly giving, because this is a giving community. We're gonna give. And anything go down, we're gonna give. But the point is, at some point in time, this community, you want me to be honest? Please. We're gonna have to wake up. We're gonna have to wake up. We're gonna have to start voting for people who's gonna represent us as a community and as a people. We no longer have the luxury to vote for familiarity. we have to vote. We have to start educating ourselves on people's policies. We have to start becoming familiar with House bills. We have to start becoming, having our representatives come to our neighborhoods, walk our neighborhoods, come to our schools, see the supplies that we have and our teachers don't have, things like that. The things we need, government infrastructure. We have a lot of fast food joints that come to this city, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you grown and you got grown people bills, we need grown jobs. So that means our education level has to change. That means we have to step up and start asking more of our educators, but we also have to start fully funding public schools. That means giving the teachers the resources, the money to stay here in Meridian, also to make sure our kids want to stay here in Meridian. Why is voting fair or a fair representation important to me? Because that's how we get part of our money. We pay taxes, I expect representation. And if I ain't getting no representation, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to pay no taxes. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm just gonna say what we say at the kitchen tables. We talk among the others, playing spades and everywhere else, but this is the place to put it on paper. Let these people know we have an expectation. We want to have we need an expectation, and we need to start holding people accountable. Why I decided to share my story, I've been in Meridian close to 25 years. I relocated here from Baltimore, Maryland. My parents got married here. They lived here. They traveled, went to Chicago. They migrated from the South, went to Chicago, and came back down towards South because they came back home. My mom just recently passed at 93 in April. She put that fight in us to get out. We know that the United States did not become a full democracy until 1965. Before then, we wasn't a full democracy. Until everybody to 1965, that's when we became a democracy. And a lot of people didn't understand that we were never so. My mom did not get a chance to vote until she was 33 with 6 kids and had been married almost 15 years. So can you imagine? And that's my mama. So you go back and think about how your grandparents, your parents, the representation that they did not have, and what we did not have here in the state of Mississippi because of the things that they chose not to provide. Yet we were working citizens. We were paying taxes, but you felt like we were, I don't want to say dehumanized, to the point where we weren't represented. And when we were represented, it wasn't a full court press as far as getting our people out to vote. The challenges, I really hadn't had a barrier here in Meridian, but I have seen it where, I'm just gonna be honest with you, with people, I'm gonna give you a good example. Western Garden and Eastern Garden. Isolation. There's no public transportation out there. We don't go out and educate to them what they need to know about voting and their rights. We want to go out there when it becomes politically correct, but people need understanding and education 24/7, 365, because this right here, what we going up against, this a monster. Point blank, this is a straight monster. And if ain't nobody told you, ain't nobody coming to save us. Nobody. So we need to band together and really start working. What makes Meridian special? Meridian gives. I don't care where you are. We gonna accept you. We gonna take you in. We gonna feed you. when situations come up, I was here uh, when Katrina hit. I had just moved here 2 weeks before, and I had never been in that situation before in my life. And I seen people come out of their houses, pull up with cars with food and say, here, take this. Y'all need clothes, fans, whatever you needed. I seen that in Meridian. I seen that come through, and the things that when we look out for each other, we look out for each other. But in the issues about what's most where I live at, we need real jobs. We need real jobs, so that means we need infrastructure. And that goes back to putting people in the office who's going to do the work. That means we need people who are going to come in and want to work and do the things that we need, because we have to remind people they do work for us. We don't work for them. And understanding of, and do I feel like we're fairly represented in elections? Locally, yes, within the last 20 years, but statewide, no. State and federal, no, at all. I feel like we have no representation at all. Because anytime you're willing to sell me out just to be somebody's best friend, so they're scared they won't talk about you, or to line your pockets so your generational wealth and your family can keep going, but you're going to sacrifice mine, you don't need to be in that office. And we need to start letting people know that if you can't do what we ask you to do, you know you're going to be fired. And that's what I mean when we need to start educating our kids at a young age about civics, about government. So when you come to you, you can't talk crazy to me because I already know. How have voting rights affected my family? I do have neighbors who've been to jail, who cannot vote. We have to dispel the myth and let people know that we're not, that you can vote. Yes, we do have 23 things that knock you out the box. But a lot of people don't understand that if you have a drug conviction, you can still vote. Even if it's a felony, you can still vote. And we have to get that information out too, because I've noticed here in Mississippi, the thing is, a lot of people tell you, my vote don't count, because we've been brainwashed, we've been we've been told, we don't see any evidence in our neighborhoods. So we don't see the new houses coming up. We don't see the new roads being paved, or the better jobs, or the training for new jobs, or for trade. We talk about it, but evidence, what you show me is totally different from what you talk about. And if we want to start doing things, we have to, once again, start at the local level. And sometimes we've gotten mixed up. We're thinking it's the federal. It is your state and your local that make your laws, their everyday life. Those are people, if you want to break it down, those are the people who determine how much food stamps you get, if you want to break it down to you. So when we put these people in office, we ought to have a requirement. I think, like I say, Meridian is a good city to raise kids, if you really want to. I moved from Baltimore City because I wanted to give my son a better chance here in Meridian. And he did. He graduated from Meridian High 2019, went into the Army Reserve, left, moved to Tuscaloosa. He's a pharmacy tech. He had to leave Meridian to get it. That's one thing I hate, that he had to leave Meridian to get it. Because once again, there's no jobs here. It's fast food, yeah, but grown women jobs. We had to expand beyond the hospitals. And I work at the hospital, but I wasn't just gonna be honest, we gotta expand past it. I'll hope for the Mississippi Voting Rights Act. I hope it fills in the spots where Justice Alito and all of them gutted us. We need that to fill in for that because people don't understand. The more they can gut it, the worse it's going to get. And our children, our grandchildren will be fighting again like it's 1962. Because believe it or not, 2026, we're still fighting for what we should have got back then. Now, and that's 62 years ago, not too long ago. We're still fighting for it. So imagine what our grandkids or your great-grandkids gonna be doing if we don't get on the ball, because we're the stepping stones here. Our kids gonna stand on us, and our kids are gonna stand on them. So if we build that foundation and get everything straight, try to get everything straight, because I know we're not, because this is lifetime work. This is not just during election time, because we know 2026 to 2030, we're gonna be fighting like hell. And if we don't step up, we're gonna be on the losing end of the stick. That's it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ramona Sanders. We really appreciate your testimony. Yes, thank you. It's not easy to get up here to provide testimony. I see that. It's not easy to get up here and provide testimony. So I appreciate anyone who is getting up here and telling us about their experiences and the things that they care about. You know, Ms. Sanders talked a lot about jobs, talked about education, talked about being able to make a living. You know, those are things that everyone cares about, right? And a lot of times people ask us, you know, why do we talk so much about voting? Why do we talk so much about redistricting? Because, well, let me just see. Raise your hand if you care about having good jobs in your community. Okay. Raise your hand if you care about sending your kids to a good public school. Okay. Raise your hands if you care about being able to afford groceries so your kids can eat every day. There we go. And so what I just saw is that every single person raised their hands about those things. If you care about any one of those things, you also care about voting. You also care about redistricting. Because how do we get representatives that will fight for all of our rights? How will we get representatives that will fight for having good jobs in our community, for being able to fully fund public education, for being able to put food on our table? That's through voting. That's through fair redistricting. And so every single person who cares about your own circumstances cares about voting and redistricting. You know, I was on the way over here, I read that Mr. Jonas Crenshaw passed away. He was my U.S. history teacher at Meridian High. And I remembered what Mr. Crenshaw would always tell us. If you took Mr. Crenshaw's class, you will remember this. He would always tell us, y'all need to have intrinsic motivation. Y'all need to have intrinsic motivation. Y'all need to be intrinsically motivated. And at the time, you know, I was like, all right, whatever, Mr. Crenshaw. But I realized, you know, he helped me understand something that was really important, which is that if you care about your own circumstances, if you care about bettering your circumstances and bettering yourself, that's what intrinsic motivation is, right? And all of us care about that. All of us are intrinsically motivated to live better lives. And the way that we can fight to improve our own circumstances is through voting, is through participating in our democracy. And so that's why I so appreciate that Ms. Sanders talked about those issues that matter to her and to her community, because that's exactly why we're here. We're not here just because it's important to go down to the polling place every election day and cast your ballot. Yes, it's important for us to be able to make that choice, but why is that important? It's important because that's how we get to better jobs. That's how we get to better healthcare. That's how we get to better circumstances for ourselves and for our communities. And so I really appreciate you, Ms. Sanders, for talking about those issues. All right, so I'm going to call up the next person to provide testimony. Let me make sure. Okay, I have Terry Rogers signed up. I would like to invite Terry Rogers to provide testimony. All right, let's give Terry a round of applause.
Good evening, everyone. I grew up in the black church, so good evening, everyone. My name is Terry Rogers. I live in the big city of Quitman, Mississippi, with 2 stoplights. And I'm the youngest person in our nation's history ever run for a statewide office. I ran when I was 18 years old for Commissioner of Agriculture and Commerce here in the state of Mississippi, right after I graduated high school. And that in part motivated me in attending this. What really motivated me is I grew up in the church. And my folks always taught me to pray. But my folks, most of all, taught me to pray not just with my lips, but with my legs. It's not enough to really say that, you know, we're praying for you while we never do anything. And I remember growing up questioning my grandmother about not really participating during the civil rights movement. And my grandmother would always tell me, well, baby, I had 7, 8 kids at home. I wasn't really able to participate, but little did I realize that some of the same rights in which people were fighting back then, I had to fight for today. And so I just can't let the moment pass me by. Voting and fair representation is important to me because I've only had 2 African Americans throughout my whole entire lifetime, which has been a long time, but I've only had 2 to represent me in Clark County. And so whenever I had the opportunity to testify in federal court, in what now will probably be the last until a pretty good bit, especially with the Supreme Court ruling on redistricting here in Mississippi, I had to share my story. I had to talk about the experiences in which I had in the county, in which is notorious for a hanging bridge, south of where I'm from, and in which politics is very racially motivated, ultimately we have to say, on several aspects. While I've never experienced any barriers to voting, I've had barriers to make my vote truly do count by way of gerrymandering. If you look at Clark County, at our House district, it's almost carved to a C almost to make sure that the African American vote is not fully maximized to its fullest extent. I've never had to experience any long lines or any transportation challenges. Thank goodness my mama always let me ride in a car whenever I needed to go to the polls. But I have seen members of my community struggle. Most of all, young people struggle. Not by way of transportation or anything like that, but young people, we are engaged politically, we are engaged in several different aspects, but a lot of times when we go to the ballot, we just feel like we don't have anything to vote for. We don't have anybody to vote for. We don't hear a lot of the policies resonating with us. We always hear the economy, both Democrats and Republicans talk about how great the GDP is doing well. Well, the GDP isn't doing well right now for a single mother in Senatobia or a single mother here in Meridian. It's not really doing well for college students struggling to pay and having their Pell Grants being cut in times such as today. So, especially with gas being $100 a gallon. So it's GDP in our own personal bank account is not looking well. That's the reason why a lot of times we feel like we just elect people who talk a good game, and sometimes they don't even do that, but don't represent us. What makes my community special is we have a lot of unity within my community. We are a marginalized community, but we are together. And the issues that matter the most to me where I live is mainly healthcare and economic job opportunities. We have a diabetes crisis where I come from. We have a healthcare crisis where I come from, much like people in the Mississippi Delta. I say the Mississippi Delta because for every 2,000 children in the Mississippi Delta, there's one pediatrician. For every 2,000 children in the Mississippi Delta, there's one pediatrician. I talk about the economy. Just last week I was in DC, and while I was in the airport, I was reminded that where I come from is much like the airport. You can't bring outside food into the airport, but you can buy food inside of the airport. And while you're inside of the airport, you're stuck with buying these high food prices and high drinks and things of that nature. In Quitman, if we don't pay for the high price food, if we don't pay for the high price gas, we're stuck, just like we are in the airport. We're forced to almost pay these high prices and things of that nature. So bringing economic opportunity is something in which I really, really, really would like to see. Do I feel like my community is fairly represented by elected officials? No, particularly statewide, like Ms. Sanders said. One of the main reasons that motivated me to come here today was 324,000 kids here in the state of Mississippi who qualify for free or reduced lunch. We have the person who's the top of the executive leaderboard in this position called governor, who declined $38 million to help poor kids who qualify for free or reduced lunch by denying it and saying that we don't want to be a welfare state, all while being tied up in one of the biggest welfare scandals in United States history. What motivated me to come today was 324 kids whose stomach are growling right now. That's what really motivated me. And voting rights affects that because we know in 2023, the election was very close. We know that it came down between so many other percentage points or things of that nature. And after that, we see attacks on the Voting Rights Act after that. And what really makes me want to see, and what I really want to see in my state is just a fair opportunity, just to make sure my vote counts just as everybody else's count. Not just so much as statewide, but district, because we know, like Ms. Sanders said, local elected officials are where the true change actually comes from, your city council. Well, if my vote has no true meaning to it and I'm voting and I'm not seeing anything, that's very demoralizing to a young person. That's very demoralizing to anybody. And how do voting rights affect me, my neighbors, or future generations? I vote because my grandmother couldn't vote. I vote because my grandmother had to live in a time in which she was beat by billy sticks, in which she saw young people sprayed with water hoses down the street like leaves, where she was born at a time where people got assassinated like Medgar Evers in their driveway. I vote because she couldn't vote. And what happens when my communities are not fairly represented? Well, we see it now. We see the top 1%, not just in the United States, but the top 1% in the state of Mississippi dictating what happens to the rest of the 99%. And so ultimately, I think what happens when communities aren't fairly represented, people stop caring. And it's almost like when you go to the dentist. Raise your hand if anybody's ever had a cavity or something like that. I know I've had a lot of sugar and sweets. And whenever you have a cavity and you go into the dentist, they give you that Novocaine. And so you got that Novocaine in your jaw and they're taking your tooth out or working on you. And if you don't have that Novocaine, you're gonna fight back. But because that Novocaine is in your jaw, you're suffering peacefully. I feel like in today's time, a lot of people have Novocaine. It's not cool to go and vote. We're suffering peacefully. It's time for us to shake the Novocaine off, I feel like, as a people and fight back. Because if the dentist start working on your teeth without the Novocaine in your jaw, you're gonna do what? You're gonna fight them back, right? So I think it's time for us to fight back. And I'll leave with this. I know I'm going past the 3 minutes, but a lot of times, ever since I was 3 years old, I go to the Selma commemoration. I go to the bridge crossing ever since I was 3 years old. So this is one of the main reasons why voting is important to me. Congressman John Lewis, one of our heroes who's now gone on. Going there always affected me in some form or fashion, not because I could resonate with them. I've never seen dogs and never seen murders and things of that nature, but it always resonated with me to understand that that's what my family went through over a piece of paper just to vote. I think in a time such as today, we have to teach that the civil rights movement truly never ended in 1968. We're living in the human rights and civil rights and equal rights and Mississippi rights movement right now. And until we truly do realize that, can we truly get change? And I'm a firm believer that we just don't get justice by way of the courts. You get justice on the sidewalks. You get justice on the pavement. You get justice on the streets. And so hopefully, I hope that we, leaving this public hearing, that we just don't leave with all of us grabbing the mic and talking about the problem and just saying what the problem is in different ways. I hope that we leave with a game plan, because we just don't want a pep rally. We want to actually be in the game and have a strategy to actually create change throughout our community and not be scared to help our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. And that's exactly why we're here today, is to help come up with what that game plan looks like. And we're going to hear about some ideas for what could go into that game plan when Imani comes up here and talks about the Mississippi State VRA and the types of protections that are in the state VRA. And then I also want to talk about a little later other ways that everyone in this room can continue to engage, because tonight is not the end of this conversation. The attacks that are going on voting rights and redistricting continue. They're going to continue for the rest of this year, with a special session being called by the legislature at some point. And so we'll talk a little bit more about other ways that y'all can continue to engage and advocate for fair representation and fair redistricting. So next on our list, I'd like to invite Sinessa Wilburn to testify. Let's give her a round of applause.
Okay. Give me a minute, y'all. Okay, my name is Sinessa Wilburn. I've lived in Meridian, Mississippi my entire life. A little bit about me. I am one of the owners of a mom and pop's quick lube here that's been active for 29 years. What motivated me to come was that mom and pop that's been here for 29 years. Why is voting or fair representation important to me? Because my dollars matter. Why did I decide to share my story? Didn't really know I was, but here I am. Have someone ever experienced a barrier? I've been told that during elections that they run out of ballots. That should never happen. Have you ever experienced? I haven't experienced anything personally. Polling places change, but people aren't notified. That's the problem. I've seen my members in my community struggle to get their voter registration cards or find out exactly where to go vote, or when they get there, if their name's not on it, having trouble with absentee ballots. Our community is special because we're a diverse community. We welcome anyone into our city. And just like Ms. Sanders said, we're just a big family. If you need something, we got it. What issues matter most to me? Like I said, my dollars matter. And so when I say that, I drive 45 miles every day for employment outside of Meridian. And with the current gas prices, that's very costly to me. I should have an opportunity of employment right here in my own city. Do you feel your community has a meaningful voice? To some degree. I've seen some improvements, especially through the NAACP and other organizations in Meridian that are like-minded and come together and try to come together with solutions and not just problems. What changes would I like to see in local elections? Like I said, just making sure that there are enough ballots available so that each person's vote counts. What would strong democracy look like in Mississippi? Whew. Wow. It would be nice to see synergy, that every person's view is respected and every voice is heard. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your testimony. It looks like we have food coming in, and so in a few minutes, I'm going to invite folks to get up and grab a plate to eat, and we're going to continue with the program while people are eating. And so as soon as the food is ready, I will let everyone know, and we can begin the process to get food. Next up, I would like to invite Mr. Richard Coleman to provide testimony today.
How's everybody today? Good to see you. And I want to encourage each of you that's here tonight or this afternoon to get involved with your community, especially our young people. Why would I say that? Why am I here? Because I experienced much of the things that we are being talked about here today. And it's important. How can you choose an opportunity to vote for someone that you think would be in your best interest as far as the needs for you and your community? So that's why voting is important. That's your voice. And I hear people all the time, young and old, my vote don't count. Well, I'm saying if you think it doesn't count, don't vote, and you're gonna find yourself in a deeper ditch than we are today. That's your voice. You have the opportunity to engage and find out what some of the people that's running for these different offices stand for. Will they represent fairly? That's the key. And I'm gonna say this. Some people might get upset, but I call it like it is. We have people look like us, but they're not there for us. And we need to identify these people and pool against them with other voters. And that's how people are being used. And voting is very important right now, what's going on in our federal government with our president. What do you think when he say, "Make America great again"? What do you think he's talking about? He's trying to make it very difficult for people to vote. He's talking about absentee ballots being cheated. And so what we are saying, when you vote for someone that is going to represent the best interest of all the people in the particular community or city or town or whatever. I want to just say something that, and I don't want people to say Richard Coleman is this. I've been involved for a lot of years. I had death threats right here in Meridian. My parents sent me away. I was 15 years old. Thought that I was going to get killed. I had death threats. I went to California, but I didn't like it. Stayed out there for a while. I came back in 1959 and got back involved. I got a draft notice. This is a story that people take for granted that everything's been all right and everything is all right. I got a draft notice when I was 19 years old. So I joined the Army Reserve to keep from going to regular Army. And my question was, why should I want to join and fight against people that's not against me, my own people against me, when I don't have equal rights? But I'm gonna go fight a war against others. So in order to keep from going to regular military, regular active duty, I joined the reserves, and it was segregated right here in Meridian, Mississippi. But I didn't go along with that. I told the black guys that was in there, had spent time in the Army, why do y'all go along with that segregation? Whites meet 1 week, blacks meet 1 week, we couldn't meet together. See, I experienced it. You had white commanders in making the decision, but I fought that, and the Department of Defense sent people down and investigated it, and they found more going on than what Richard Coleman had reported and others. So I knew that if I stayed around, they were going to try to get me. So I took the Air Force test to let people know the reason I could pass it. I think it's going to say the reason why you went down reserve, you couldn't pass the regular test. I went in because I didn't want to go in regular military. But I passed the test, and they were just letting blacks go into what they call critical career fields. We wasn't supposed to be intelligent enough to do certain things. I was one of the first black jet engine technicians in the history of the Air Force. I'm not bragging. I realized I had to be twice as good as my counterparts in order to get recognition. And I'm saying this because you got to stay in the fight. I was one of the first crew chiefs to have a woman to work as a JW technician. If they could work and do the job, hey, I welcome you. But if you can't do the job, I don't need you. I don't care who it is. And what's so bad about it is that it took many, many years for the Department of Defense to stand up and do what's right for all the fellow soldiers and military personnel. I didn't know nothing about it. The commander called me in and said, Sergeant Coleman, I got some good and bad news. What do you want to hear? I said, the good news. He said, you was highly recommended for a new AFSC, a new job. Are you aware of social action? And I said, yes, sir, drug and alcohol counseling, guys coming from Vietnam, they had a problem with drug and alcohol and stuff like that. But he said, well, the Department of Defense has extended it, it changed it. They felt that there's a problem in race relation, and you would highly recommend to teach race relation. I did that. I accepted it. And I wore civilian clothes my first 3 years because I was teaching officers, and here I'm a little staff sergeant, but they didn't know my rank about in civilian clothes. But to make a long story short, we have to stand up, and your voice matters, and voting is your voice. And if someone tells you that your vote don't count, you tell them that you don't count either. Because it's critical. Make America great again is going backwards. That's what it want to be when you hear that term. And if you don't vote, you can't remove these people that got that mindset. So I encourage all of you, and it's a lot on here that I could talk about, but I would like to answer some questions. I just want people to ask me questions. I know they wrote down here, but people out there, if you got any questions, ask me, and if I can help you, I will. I look around and I see young people that I use as youngsters, and it's great to see them still involved. A few. We need more, though. And we need more. So we got to, it was mentioned about education. Do you know they're trying to take certain things out of our education system? We didn't have that much, they're trying to take that out. American history, Black history, they don't want that to be included in American history. Did you know that? If that happened, it's only ill preparing our children to face the reality of the foundation of this country. And we got to stand up, and our vote do count. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coleman. That history is incredibly important because we know that that history led to the enactment of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And what they are trying to do now, just like Mr. Coleman ended on, is erase that history. Because if they erase that history, that means that they erase the reasons why we need the protections that the Voting Rights Act gave us. I was just in Montgomery at with the Equal Justice Initiative. They have these incredible museums and memorials that talk about the entire history of slavery, Reconstruction, the end of Reconstruction, Jim Crow, all the way through mass incarceration, where we are today. And it struck me that history is critical to understand what we are going through right now. There's a reason why they're trying to ban teaching that history in our schools. Mississippi passed a law last year that said you cannot teach, you cannot engage in any speech that raises awareness about race in the state. At every level of government, or every level of education, higher education all the way down to pre-K, public education. Now, we filed a lawsuit and got that law stopped from being in effect for now, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to erase that history so that we no longer know why we need the types of protections that we do. And so I appreciate you flagging and raising that for us, because that history is so important. So now we have food over here that's ready to serve. And so why don't we take a 5-minute break? People can get up, stretch, grab some food, come back to your tables, and then we're gonna hear from Imani Brooks about Mississippi State VRA and some of the protections that we've been talking about. All right, folks, we're going to get started again in 2 minutes. We'll get started again in 2 minutes. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started again. So could everyone please take your seats? I also want to say thank you to all of the organizations who have been a part of putting this together. We have a big coalition of organizations that have come together to respond to the Calais decision, to educate folks, to mobilize folks, to advocate for voting rights. And so a few of those coalition members are here today. I want to thank SPLC over there in the corner. I want to thank Mississippi Votes. I want to thank the NAACP. I want to thank One Voice, who covered the food for us. So thank you all for feeding us tonight. And there are so many more organizations that have been a part of putting all of this programming together. So really, really appreciate everyone's involvement. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started with our next community member who is testifying. I'd like to invite Ms. Delk to provide testimony. Could we give her a round of applause, please?
Good afternoon. I'm no stranger to most people in this room, and they know I'm not a public speaker, but I'm gonna just tell what happened to me. I started off, my name is Johnny Depp. I started off this here thing when I was 18 years old, staying right up there on 35th Avenue at 16th Street, where Jane Chaney and them had they van all the way at the Nazarene Church. My mother used to feed them chicken before they took them to Philadelphia and got killed. And my story is, I'm gonna make it short because I'm not a public speaker. But from 18 years old up until now, 83 years old, praise the Lord, I have been in this fight a long time. I engaged with people that couldn't go out, had the oxygen tank on the bed. I registered them to vote. Donna Jill Johnson taught me how. And then after she taught me how, she wanted to take it away from me. But I had a group of ladies, Miss Coleman is one of them right there, Margie Alexander. We turned Meridian bottom sides upper. We fill our application, take it down there to a stack of them. She'll mark through them, then throw them back to me. Go back and get this on there. Go back and get this on there. Get the middle name, get this. She have give us a problem down there, but we didn't give up. We kept it going, house to house, knocking on doors, walking. Bless Chuck Young heart. He always, Miss Dilk, call me Mama Dilk. Here's some money, put some gas in that Avalon you got. And here we go again. Miss Walker, Miss Alexander, and I, we shook Meridian. And to make a long story short, She taught us how to do it. The people couldn't get out. I had over 200-some people that they bound being mailed to their house. Miss Simone Sanders, bless her heart, her mother was one of them, and her sister too. They both gone now. Over there at Oakland Heights, we raised all these apartments, all these projects, door to door. Some of them closed the door in our face. Some of them getting in the car. We take them to vote. They want us to buy them a hot dog. We owe them something to get out and vote. Now, what we need to do is get back to basic. Registering to vote is not the problem. If I tell you how many people we have registered here in Meridian, Mississippi, it would shock you. Getting them out to the poll after we get them registered, that's the problem. We put gas and stuff out of our pocket in the cars, go around to pick them up and take them to the poll. Main thing, when you take them to the poll, you take them back home, they're hungry. We take money out of our pocket, buy them bologna, bread, something like that. Miss Coleman, she could witness to that. To make a long story short, we need to get young people. Like I said, I'm 83 now. We need to get young people. How can we get young people involved? We need to get the young people. I'm gonna say it again. Most of us over here is right now retirement age. And we can't get around like we used to. But I want to challenge y'all to get young people. We used to stop on the side of the road, registering people, stack of people, registering vote. But when we're taking the Donna's ear, they ain't right, she'll throw them back to them. But like I said, she learned us how to do it. Then after she learned us, then she wanted to take it away. We have went there several times, and she reject us, but we didn't quit. Bless her heart, she gone on down. But I want to challenge everybody in this building. We got to get busy. We got to get them to the poll. How can we get them to the poll? That's going to be our main thing. If anybody want to ask me questions, just let me know. Anybody want to get with me, in my house, I have plastic containers of people that's registered that don't go to the poll and vote. I have closet of papers and stuff of people that I know that registered that will not go out and vote. You got to go to their house and get them. You got to buy them cigarettes. And I hate to say it, they even ask for beer. It's just amazing how people feel like we owe them something to go to the poll. But like I said, I'm not going to take any more time, and I thank the privilege for y'all letting me speak today. I wear several hats, the mama deck, boots on the ground, voting lady. I don't think too many people in Meridian don't know me. And I just want to thank y'all for allowing me to speak. What we need to do is to just get peoples like these gentlemen here, Mr. Elliott, there, and Chuck Young, my main guy, bless his heart, he's going on, to get with us, the lawyer, to go to circuit clerks and find out what's going on there. That's the holdup. But one of them gone on, so I don't know if we're gonna have that struggle or not. But what we need to do, go to circuit clerks and find out why these people off the road book. I'm gonna say this. This guy, he was in his 60s. He was disabled. Had his ballot mailed to his house. I called the circuit clerk, said, why he ain't get his ballot? They said, somebody told us he had moved. That's a vote that he didn't get. I had to take his application back to circuit clerks down there and had to get it refilled out, take it back to him to get on the permanent list to vote. Permanent list is what really matters. This is where you get your vote, and most of it is passed away. But that permanent list where people can't get out, just because you can't get out, you can vote. Have it mailed to your house. You can call circuit clerks. Have her to mail the ballots. Anytime y'all have a problem getting people to the poll or want to go where they can't get out the house on a wheelchair, house confined, just give me a call. Everybody here just about have my number, know how to reach me. Thank y'all. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you so much, Ms. Delk, for your testimony, but also all of the work that you have done to help people to register and cast their ballots in Meridian. It is an incredible, incredible service that you have made to the community and to our democracy here in Mississippi. So thank you so much. One thing that I want to point out before we go to Imani is all of the difficulties, how difficult it was for Ms. Delk and others to register people to vote or help them cast their ballots. It shouldn't be that hard. It should not be difficult for us to cast our ballots. There's this thing called the cost of voting index. It's a study that a bunch of researchers who look at elections have done, and they rank states based on their election laws and their practices, based on how difficult it is in that state to cast a ballot. Guess where Mississippi ranks? Number 50. In 2024, we were number 50. They do it every 2 years, so there's another one coming out this year. In 2024, we were number 50. We are the hardest state in the country to cast a ballot. And so all of those things that Ms. Delk had to do to help people cast their ballots, she shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to do that. As voters in Mississippi, it shouldn't be that hard for us to vote, and that's why we need to make changes to our laws. And so I want to now invite Imani Brooks from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to join us to provide expert testimony about some of the solutions to the problems that we've heard about tonight and that we know face us in the time ahead. And so Imani is policy counsel at the Legal Defense Fund. She has worked on state voting rights acts across the country, including in the South. And so I'd like to invite Imani Brooks up to join us.
Thank you. All right, good evening. I know I'm the last speaker, one of the last speakers, so I will try to not be repetitive, but I really appreciate everyone being here and sharing your stories, talking to me about Meridian. So for the record, good evening. My name is Imani Brooks. I am policy counsel at the Legal Defense Fund, or LDF, where America's premier legal organization fighting for racial justice, and we are a prominent thought partner of the civil rights groups advocating for state voting rights acts across the country. And LDF stands in solidarity with all of you and with the Mississippi voting rights community in support of the Robert G. Clark Jr. Voting Rights Act of Mississippi, or the Mississippi VRA. And I put on y'all's tables a little explainer about it, but to give you more context about LDF, you might have heard of someone named Thurgood Marshall. He was the first Black Supreme Court justice, and he founded LDF over 85 years ago. And we have prioritized protecting the right of Black communities to vote. LDF has worked side by side here in Mississippi with organizers and advocates to provide legal resources in advancing voting rights from the earliest days of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Back in the day, we did have an office in Jackson, and we assumed responsibility for over 100 cases and represented over 250 Freedom Summer workers. Today, LDF continues to draw from the legacy of Freedom Summer in conducting year-round election protection work and fighting for fair maps in the courts, most recently in DeSoto County and in Foster versus State of Mississippi. So what do? So I work on something called state voting rights acts. And in the wake of recent Supreme Court cases, we've heard about Calais a little bit, that have undercut the federal Voting Rights Act. And as Congress struggles to do anything about it, and as states across the country move to further restrict the right to vote, LDF has prioritized advancing state voting rights acts, or state VRAs, to meet the urgent need of our people. LDF has worked with partners to successfully advocate for enactment of such laws in numerous states. In 2026, we have passed VRAs in Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey. And next week, I will go and watch the Delaware VRA be signed. So there are now 11 state VRAs across the country, and many have been introduced in the South, which I will talk about at the end. So the Robert G. Clark Jr. Voting Rights Act of Mississippi is an important tool for voting rights in this moment. And as we've heard, Mississippi has this long history of discrimination, racism, and violence against Black Americans, which makes it the hardest place to vote in the country. And I won't repeat some of my thunder that might have been stolen. So for LDF, we are specifically looking at electoral maps as well. So I think it was Terry who testified about whether or not his vote counts really in Clark County. And that idea is around fair representation. It's about this thing called racial vote dilution, which refers to whether or not maps are structured in a way to make members of a racial minority have their voices heard, allow them to elect candidates of choice. And one of our most recent efforts to achieve more fair representation for Black Mississippians was in DeSoto County. So in DeSoto, currently all 5 county voting districts were drawn to maintain majority white representation after the 2020 census, even though Black voters are now about 1/3 of the county's population, and even though Black residents objected to the map. In June, the Federal District Court in Mississippi applied the unfortunate April 2026 Calais ruling to uphold the discriminatory effect of that map. And this is despite 36 witnesses, many everyday people and expert witnesses who came and talked for 12 days, and there was over 300 exhibits. There's yet to be an answer to Black DeSoto County's residents' call for fair representation in county government. And so while Black voters in Mississippi are, we have these issues that you guys have talked about, there's predictable suppression tactics that groups like Mississippi Votes and LDF try to get in front of, there are legislative fixes that could give Mississippi voters what they deserve, such as a Mississippi VRA. So the Mississippi VRA is adapted both from the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the best practices that have been summarized in a national model state VRA bill to protect against discriminatory barriers to the ballot box in Mississippi. And I'm going to go into depth about 3 topics. One is called preclearance. One is called vote dilution, which is the idea that your vote doesn't count as much as someone else's, and a prohibition against intimidation, deception, and obstruction at the ballot box. So to understand preclearance, you need to understand what the Federal Voting Rights Act did at its height. The heart of the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 was Section 5's preclearance program. And so for nearly 50 years, the federal VRA required states like my home state of Virginia, like Mississippi, to submit certain voting changes to the federal government, to courts, before implementing them to stop discrimination before they happen. So ideally, we would catch a problem, and then we wouldn't have to have a lawsuit about it. And this protected millions of voters for, as I said, nearly 50 years. In 2013, we lost that protection through a court case. But the Mississippi VRA is building a localized and targeted version of that extremely successful program. For the Mississippi VRA, the preclearance program is administered by a nonpartisan commission, and it will be full of commissioners that are not biased, that they have the background to really look at these policies. And the commission would determine which local governments are covered or have to submit policies, and they would let the community know on an annual basis which communities are on that list. These jurisdictions are subject to preclearance based on recent civil and voting rights violations, or if there's large disparities in arrests, traffic stops, voter registration rates, voter turnout rates. And that what you're seeing in those disparities is that Black people or other voters of color are hurt or harmed by these issues. And then at the end of the day, preclearance would be making sure that Black voters and other voters of color are not worse off under the new voting policy. And that is a unique element of state voting rights acts and responds to the fact that we don't have a federal preclearance program anymore. Another element of the Mississippi VRA prohibits any methods or election or district maps that weaken or drown out the voices of protected class members. And I mentioned this a bit, it's racial vote dilution, racial gerrymandering. This protection and the private right of action to enforce it is similar to protections that we had under Section 2. But in state voting rights acts, like the one for Mississippi, we're not incorporating things that we are told in Calais and other cases. This cause of action, or the right to bring a case under the Mississippi VRA, meets this moment in our democracy when the Supreme Court is undercutting Black voters' ability to enforce fair district maps. I gave DeSoto County as an example, but all across the country, members of Congress, state legislators are selected in essentially the same way, a single winner in a single district. And at the local level, elections are mostly structured the same way or conducted as at-large elections, where all voters across a city or county vote for all candidates. And these systems have one thing in common. The winner takes all, even if they have just a few more votes, and the losers are locked out of representation and power entirety. However, there are other ways to choose leaders. There's other methods of election that communities can choose. And the Mississippi VRA embraces these alternative methods of election as remedies or solutions ordered by a court to racial discrimination in voting based on the success of these methods in jurisdictions across the country. So in the 80s in Alabama, they had different methods of election that were used. In New York, we recently had court cases that have ordered these other methods of election, cumulative voting, limited voting. And I bring up Alabama and New York because they are seemingly very different states. Whenever I'm advocating in New York, they say we're not Alabama, and when I'm advocating in Alabama, they say we're not New York. However, both states were subject to federal preclearance at some point, parts of the state were. And so, that means that racial discrimination can happen anywhere in the country by any people, and it is important to be able to hold them accountable when there's discrimination. So the Mississippi VRA's vote dilution cause of action and these broad remedies, these different types of ways to elect candidates are crucial now because in Calais, Justice Kagan said that Section 2 of the VRA is all but a dead letter. We need a state solution. And the last part of the VRA, the state VRA that I will explain is the prohibition against intimidation, obstruction, and deception. So while the preclearance program and the protection against vote dilution are included mainly with the intent of restoring practices and legal tests that have been eliminated from the federal VRA, the prohibition against intimidation in the Mississippi VRA aims to fill in potential gaps from the still standing Section 11B of the federal VRA. So there's a part of the federal VRA that we still have called 11B that gives some protections against intimidation. But the Mississippi VRA is broadening that protection. We want that protection to go for any threats, interference, or false information about voting, if that interferes with voters' ability to engage freely with the electoral process, and election workers' ability to carry out those lawful duties. This broad prohibition is empowering voters and election workers to, one, get an immediate stop to the bad action, or to get damages, to get money in court against any kind of defendant, private actors, or even public officials, which is different from the federal VRA. Additionally, the Mississippi VRA is designed to meet the threats voters and election officials face as technology develops, as AI develops. And Section 11B has yet to be interpreted by courts to do this kind of work. I do want to touch a little bit on this Calais decision. So I think there's some confusion about what can we do after Calais. And state VRAs are a solution, and they do still stand as sound law across the country, because after Calais, state VRAs are one of the only remaining tools to remedy racial discrimination at the local level. So that means that claims brought in a state court under a state VRA will be more effective than claims brought in federal court under Section 2, because Section 2 is basically gone. And furthermore, state VRA protections were not at issue in that Supreme Court case. So states now still have their long-established power to prevent racial discrimination, and we must call on states to actually exercise that power. And so LDF will continue to advocate for state VRAs like the Mississippi VRA, and edit them if necessary to be successfully passed, and we encourage others to do the same. So in conclusion, while it is an uphill battle to pass these voting rights bills in the South, voters, advocates, pro-voting rights legislators find ways to make their voices heard. And this hearing is proof of that. Rep. Elliott, sorry, I was like, I'm gonna say the wrong word. Elliott is proof of that as a co-signer of the Mississippi VRA. And we have seen in other states, Louisiana and Georgia, they have joined Alabama, Texas, and Florida in introducing comprehensive state VRAs in anticipation of Calais. They did this before the Supreme Court took away our rights. Residents of these states where the federal VRA has been most transformative are insisting that our democracy will in fact be one of and for the people, and not one dictated by a Supreme Court that has forgotten its duties. And so I leave with you with a call to be creative, to be consistent and relentless in the pursuit of a multiracial democracy, and I think that's shown by the people who are here today, the stories we've heard today. Mississippi is the first southern state to have a community hearing on a state Voting Rights Act, creating this public record of the need for legislation in lieu of the state legislature not doing their job. And Alabama was the first state in the Deep South to have a committee hearing on a state VRA, and the first state in the Deep South to see its VRA pass out of committee. Both of those things were established this year. The Louisiana VRA had its own committee hearing only a week after Alabama, with hundreds of slips of support. That means hundreds of people came to the state capitol to make their voices heard. And Florida was the first state to use their VRA as a hostile strike all amendment to defeat a suppressive bill. So there's much power in these actions and these bills, and this movement excites LDF, excites me personally. I want to thank everyone who launched the Mississippi Voting Rights Act campaign in February, and that was HB 1446. And the movement of the Robert G. Clark Jr. Voting Rights Act of Mississippi is imperative to rebuild our democracy, reject this recent backsliding of voting rights, and retrieve the hard-fought wins of Freedom Summer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imani. Does anyone have any questions for Attorney Brooks while we have her up at the table? I see a question back there. I only have one mic, so you're going to have to.
Yes. So his question was, does Delaware have a Voting Rights Act? They do. It's called the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. It was passed this year within 60 days of introduction. And it prohibits the problem that you're seeing in Clark County where your vote doesn't count. It prohibits intimidation at the polls, and it establishes rules for judges to interpret laws in a way that's pro-voter friendly. So it's a good bill, and we're coming back for more because there's other aspects that we want, but yes, they did a thing.
Any other questions for Attorney Brooks? One thing that I want to say, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you making the trip. One thing that I want to emphasize about the State Voting Rights Act, it oftentimes feels like we're always playing defense. It oftentimes feels like we're always fending off attacks on voting rights. We're consistently under assault, which is true. Voting rights are under assault. But there are ways for us to fight back that are more than just defending against the attacks that we're experiencing. There are ways for us to go on offense ourselves. And that's what a state voting rights act is. A state voting rights act says we are not going to fight on the other side's terms. A state voting rights act says we are going to take control of the narrative and fight on our own terms and come up with our own solutions for what we want to see in our democracy. And we are going to experience over the next several months attempts to redistrict our congressional seats, our state legislative seats, potentially the state Supreme Court. Tate Reeves has already said that he wants to call a special session before the end of the year to try to eliminate districts where black voters can elect their candidates of choice. We have to fight against that at every turn, right? We have to fight against that by attending any hearings that they hold. We're hearing that there might be a hearing on August 10th in Jackson, and I encourage everyone in this room to come, to pack that room, to try to testify if they allow it, and even if they don't allow it, make your voice heard. They're going to hold hearings across the state between August 15th and September 30th. That's what the Lieutenant Governor has said on redistricting. And I also encourage everyone in this room to go to those hearings, testify, make your voice heard, tell them exactly why you don't want to see them eliminate black political power in this state, but you also have to tell them what you want them to do. You also have to tell them that you want them to pass legislation that actually protects our rights, like a Mississippi State Voting Rights Act, because it is not enough for us to play defense. We also have to go on offense and take control of this narrative. So I really, really appreciate Ms. Brooks for coming here and for talking about the State Voting Rights Act. There are ways for us to fight back beyond just always being on defense. And so now we're nearing the close of the program, and we are joined by our esteemed legislators here, and they have sat with us, listened to community members, provide testimony about their experiences and their visions for democracy, and I want to give them an opportunity to provide their reactions and their response to what they've heard here tonight. So we have Representative Gregory Elliott here, who represents Meridian, and we also have Representative Ricky Thompson. So we are very grateful for you both to be here. Senator Rod Hickman was also here. I think he had to leave, but I'll turn it over to you, Representative Elliott, to give a response to the testimony that you've heard today.
Thank you, Amir. How's everybody doing? A lot of people left, but just like in my club days, I used to stay till they cut the lights on, so it's nothing new for me. Before I start, I want to give the distinguished gentleman, Representative Ricky Thompson, a chance to say a couple of words. Rick traveled a long way, him and his beautiful wife, so it will be apropos for us to just give him a chance to say a few words.
I want to say good evening, everyone. I want to thank the representative for inviting me down, and Amir would have done a great job. But one thing I have to say, as they say, I'm State Representative Ricky Thompson, where I represent North Mississippi, where I represent 4 counties. I lead Monroe, Chickasaw County, but if you from here, North Mississippi, there's Tupelo. But the thing about it, I want everybody to know is that the same thing that's happening down here is happening in North Mississippi. I don't care what community you go to or person, people of color, it's the same thing happening. But we have to continue to fight. Just like we're doing right now. We had to get the information out to make sure they know what's going on. And we'll have to go to these town halls meetings to be educated. The main thing is we got to understand things happen at the Capitol down there. It means when we start making policies, that means you guys got to show up and show your voice because you are the power of the state of Mississippi. And as legislator, I'm just like everybody else. I want to keep my hand on the pulse, go throughout the state and see what's happening. And same thing is happening. In North Mississippi, same thing's happening down here. So that means we have to get out and fight because guess what? The only way we can make change, we have to be down there to let our legislators know that we do want change. And I appreciate this opportunity just to be here. And thank you so very much.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you. All right. I'll be brief as possible. That's probably about 20 minutes. But first of all, let me say thank you to Amir, D'Angelo back there. Thank you so much. Representative Thompson, beautiful wife. I think I see Supervisor Norwood back there. Thank you for coming. And any other elected officials here, Mississippi Votes, one vote, everybody. Today brings to mind something that I heard a long time ago, and it resonated in my mind, and it helps motivate me to do the things that I do. And it goes a little something like this. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal with certain inalienable rights, of which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, okay? It didn't say, even though it was probably implied, but it didn't say that we hold all white men. It didn't say all black men. It didn't say all Republicans. It didn't say all Democrats. It didn't say all Latinos. It said all people. And that was a promise in writing that this country made to all of us. Now, at the time, granted, we were in slavery. But since then, we have become citizens, which means by extrapolation, that applies to all of us. So we're not asking for anything other than what we're supposed to have. This is our rights. These are our rights. As tax-paying citizens, we all deserve the right to be represented. You say now, what about the people that don't pay taxes? Well, if you go buy a loaf of bread, you pay taxes. If you go buy a stick of gum, you're going to pay taxes. We all pay taxes, and our taxes go to the things that make this government be the most powerful government in the world. And for that reason and other reasons, we deserve representation. We're not trying to take voting from anybody. We're not trying to vote so we can step on somebody's toes. We just want our right to be heard. And so from that perspective, we have to attack the problem. It's not a black and white problem, okay? It's a rights problem. Every person has certain inalienable rights. Okay, so in closing, I'd like to thank our warriors. Ms. Delk, I'm one of your soldiers. You just let me know what you need. Ms. Coleman, Mr. Coleman, Miss Ivy, love all of y'all, man. You all are the reason that we're here today. And I want you all to understand that. You're the reason that I stand right here today. It's you and people like you that are the reason that I'm here, and I'll never forget that as long as I live. My grandfather, when I got sworn in at the state capitol, and I'll be brief, just tell you the story. The speaker told me, he said, I'm gonna do something for you I don't usually do. I said, what's that, Mr. Speaker? He said, I'm gonna let you talk. I said, that's a mistake, but anyway, I'll take it. But while I was standing there and I looked around the gallery, and I just welled up with emotion. And I had to say what I said, and I didn't mean any malice. I was just telling the truth. And this is what I said. I said, my grandfather, the only way that he could have gotten in this Capitol is that he was polishing a knob or sweeping the floor. I said, in his lifetime, it was out of his realm of conception that he would ever be able not only to come in here, but to be standing where his grandson is standing. I said, so he couldn't do it. I said, but you know something? I got his chromosomes inside of me. I got his DNA inside of me. So I'm here, which means that he's here. So what I'm saying to all of you all is just remember something. Somebody in your family made a sacrifice for you to be here. So because they couldn't be here at this time, you have to fight not only for yourself, but fight for them. And that's what we have to do. And lastly, I'm gonna say this. We can flip this state with just the people in this room. And I'm gonna tell you why, how. There was a man named A.G. Gaston, and he owned an insurance company in Birmingham, Alabama, years ago. He was a multi-millionaire. And this is what he did. He told everybody that he sold a policy to go out and bring me 3 people. He said, if you go out and bring me 3 people and let me sell policies to them, and then in turn, each one of them go out and get 3 people, exponentially, my business will grow and I will in turn invest into the community. Everybody in here knows 3 people. And those 3 people know 3 people. And those 3 people know 3 people. And it goes on and on and on and on until we achieve our goals. And that's what we have to do. And that's the mentality that we have to have. Last thing, I heard somebody say something about community, okay? And I'm gonna leave on this note. Community can be your family. It can be your block. It can be your city, your state, your country. Because what community is community is a group of people that coalesce together around common goals, goals that will help each other. I didn't say they had to agree, and I didn't say all of them had to be of the same religion, color, or political affiliation. You just have to be willing to work together. That's community, and that's what we have to do. So in saying that, I'm going to say God bless you all. Thank you all for listening. I came in under 20 minutes. I appreciate you. Thank you, Amir.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much to both of our representatives here who were gracious enough to, in Representative Thompson's case, drive all the way down here from his home district and take time out of his schedule. Representative Elliott, thank you for your words. Thank you for being here. You know, we're near the end of our program now, and I'm going to turn it back over to D'Angelo to close us out. But before that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight. I know it was raining outside. I heard the thunder, and no one wants to go outside in the rain, so I appreciate y'all coming out in the rain, being here, because what this is, what we have done here tonight is a demonstration of power. When people come together, when community comes together behind a common goal, a common purpose, and works together towards that, that is a demonstration of power. And that power is what they're afraid of. That is what they're afraid of. That's why they're coming after our voting rights. That's why they're coming after education. That's why they're coming after history, because they are afraid of the power that each and every one of the people in here holds. And we have to exercise that power. This is the time for us to exercise that power. In the midst of all of the attacks on voting rights, we have to be even more courageous and exercise the power that we have. And so thank you so much for being here and exercising your power tonight. The fight doesn't stop tonight. We already talked about some of the fights that are ahead of us. But tonight is the first step of many that we are going to take to fight back and exercise our power. So thank you all so much. I'll invite D'Angelo back up to close us out. And I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much.
Good evening again, everyone. Let's give everyone a hand for the work that they've done tonight. So one thing that I thought of as we sat here listening to the testimony and all of the things that people shared tonight, it reminds me of the work that Medgar Evers done in his lifetime. Many people thought that he did something a whole lot more than what he did. But what he did was he went into communities just like they came here, and he talked with community people, and he got testimony. That was his job as the field secretary of the NAACP. So what we did tonight was the same work that Medgar Evers did in the 60s. The same power that those people had back then is the same power that we have now. Representative Elliott stole a lot of my shine. I was going to do a call to action and tell us to make sure that we talk to our family members and people that we know and get them out to vote, because we often look at a big picture, but we don't take it all the way down to the pixel. If we look at ourselves as individuals and the people that are close to us, it might be small to us, but when we all get together, it's one big picture. So let's, like Representative Elliott said, let's get to those people that we know best, those in our close circle. And if we could reach 5 people each, and then they turn around and reach 5 more people, before you know it, we'll have a whole different state than what we see. So I thank everyone for coming out tonight. I thank everyone for staying here until the end. Like Amir said, this is not the end of this programming, but this is just the end of tonight. So the way that we communicated with you to get you here this time will be the same way we communicate in the future. So at this time, we ask that everybody please be safe on the roads going home. We thank y'all once again for showing up. And if you need us, oh, one more thing. We look at our elected officials and we think of politics as a one-way street. We go into a voting booth and we elect someone and they go to the Capitol and they represent us. However, they are one person that represents a lot of people. It's our duty to call them and ask them, what do you need us to do while you're out working for us? What do you need us back home to continue to do to help strengthen your stance while you're there? Because we sent them there, but we also are supposed to support them while they are there. So it's easy for us to come into a room and tell legislators what we feel we need to be done, what we need done for us or what we want to see done. But we also have to be a recipient of them telling us what we need to do to support them in order to get that done. So let's make sure that every time we come up with a problem that we also want to be a part of the solution. So once again, we thank y'all for coming out tonight, and you guys be safe going home. Thank you.